Hi, I'm Molman, and here today I'm going to talk about for you guys the new update that came out for Istrolid today. That's 39.4, and it has added one new part for us to play around with, which is the spinal mount, as you can see here. And essentially what that part does is it grants 300 bonus range to any weapon it is attached to, and it will give you 5 HP and only weigh 20 tons and be $15. That's comparable essentially to the 180 turret mount, except for the fact that it will only have a 30-degree arc and it will weigh twice as much. Now, the advantages and disadvantages of this. Your advantages come in things like your plasma rings and your phase bombs, right? And what this does is it allows for 1 to 2 shots of a weapon that would usually be one shot within a closer range. It now gives you a second to a third shot to actually achieve what you're going for when you mount this weapon on your ship. Now the disadvantages here are pretty big. It's a lot heavier, which means your ships are going to be slower, you need more power, you need more thrusters. You're also going to see a very short range of fire, so this means it's not for taking out fighters. It's not for doing anything other than engaging larger, slower ships, and it'll give you that chance to sort of move around and get that shot off earlier and continue and hopefully get a second or third shot off before you're in range to the point where they can destroy your ship. Now, the second big change today was module sharing. Module sharing, the way it used to work, is it would split the effect of a module in between whatever weapons it was attached to. That meant that a reloader like this would only have half effect on both the plasma turret and the point defense. But now what this means is that we are capable of seeing only a 10% reduction. That's compared to a 50% reduction that we used to have for every additional gun mounted. Now, essentially what that means is you could have 5 guns around one reloader and it would have the same effect as if you had split it originally like these were split before the update. So, weapons module sharing much more effective now. We're going to see ships that share modules such as this, where you have one damage shared in between multiple phase bombs all over the ship design. Much more practical in play, will be a lot better. These will do significantly more damage in this case. In other cases they would do other things. This also means on a ship like this, say this would have more range because it's got 2 range boosters on it, and they're now 40% more effective on both weapons, which means on the phase bomb and on the gravity pull wave they will now be 40% more effective. Some of the minor changes we're going to see this update, the Tesla cannon can now bounce up to 10 times, which means that it is bouncing more than twice as much, which is a large change in the sense that it used to be able to chain to 4 targets and it would do a maximum or minimum rather of 10 damage to each target it bounced to. Now, the change that came out today means that it's going to be hitting every single target, as many times as it can. It's going to hit 10 targets, right? Which means your damage is going to go much closer to 4 than the original 10 it was before the update. Now, this was meant to be a nerf to Teslas, which I feel wasn't necessary, considering they weren't viable in competitive play to the point that they needed a nerf. Now, this coming out means they're a lot less viable for swarm control, because instead of taking out 4 targets very well, it'll do slight damage to 10 targets. Now this is going to make it essentially useless. There, I don't believe, is any practical use for the Tesla turret past this point until it gets a buff. Now it's stacking 10 times is also going to mean when you hit a cluster of Teslas, it is possible now, conceivable, but not, I don't believe, practical, that you could do something like a kiter but with a Tesla, and hopefully, if you worked it out correctly, you could get it to chain to 10 targets and effectively with a large enough ball kill 10 targets at once. Now, is that practical? Would it work? No, it won't, because you're doing 4 damage per Tesla, which even with a damage booster, it's not enough to take out most small ships. Against another kiter, such as one of my design with 283 HP, there would be no chance in hell. It would take too long. Any viable rush strategy or egg would have no issue playing against Tesla now. Not that they did have a significant issue before, it's just it's been made a lot less viable. Now, another thing that's come out today is the cloak decloak radius now from 100, or is now 100 from 0 rather. That's straight from the patch notes, and what that means essentially is when you consider a ship's size, it is no longer going to be a 150 meter ship will now decloak when it is, 160 meters away, something like that. Now it will be when it is 100 meters away, it will decloak regardless of the size. So now a fighter that is made to be very small will still uncloak at a larger distance. You won't see as much of an effect on the larger Tesla, or Ringer assassins rather, but you will see a change in smaller ships that attempt to cloak and capture points. It'll be a lot less viable. With the Tesla nerf, I don't expect it to damage too much on how those are used, since they weren't used much to begin with. But in essence, now it will be a lot less viable to attempt to use a small cloaked ship to go behind and capture points towards their spawn at the beginning of the game. Now, the next change that happened is you can move the ships in editor, which I love this change. I've been waiting for it for a long time. I can now arrow keys up, down, and around my screen, and it will give you the ability to a ship that was poorly positioned, redesign it. As we move forward in the update, dissecting it a little bit more, we really do need to talk about meta changes, and I do feel that there will be some. However, I don't feel that it'll be as major as some people, I believe, feel it will be. The big reason I don't think it's going to be that bad is because spinal mounts, they're not great. They're slower, they're heavier, they take up more space, and you can only have 4 weapon attachments attached to them at one time, which does mean that they will not have the ability to be as boosted as others are, and they won't be given the ability to play like other mounts play. So don't just expect it to be a flat 300 range boost to any weapon you want, because it's just not. As we see ships like plasma ringers and phase bombers start to use spinal mounts, I feel that there is potential in a plasma ringer using it effectively on a battleship in the place of, say, a laser mount, because it will give a second or a third shot to a plasma ring rather than it being a close-up one hit. Hopefully this will give us the ability to see it more in play as a battleship weapon that will be used more than once or twice before the ship is destroyed. The second change I think we're going to see come out is any ship that uses more than 5 mounts, I believe, is essentially done. With the way that module sharing now works, it is more viable to share a module between 2 weapons than it is to add another weapon. It just doesn't make sense at this point to spam, say, 10-15 mounts on one giant ship and attempt to have that work out for you than it is to just, say, have 5 or 6 mounts and share components between them, now that we are seeing that 40% buff to shared modules. Past that, I think phase bombers are going to be a lot more useful now, because you can essentially put a lot more modules on than you can, say, mounts, and so that'll give us hopefully more viability for phase bombers that have less individual weapons and more module sharing. As well as on kiters, it'll be available now for people to actually be able to use competitively viable shared modules, which means things like Sidewalk, who's using a ship remarkably similar to mine. He shares both a point defense and a plasma as well, which means that those will be more effective now, and you'll be given more of a chance to do that. What are your thoughts? If you've got any suggestions for future Istrolid commentary, leave them in the suggestions below, and have a nice day. It's been Moleman.